I drank that coffee every morning, never suspecting it was killing me. I kissed a woman who wished for my death. I called a friend the man who planned to live in my house after I was gone. My name is Nick. I'm 36 years old, and I live in the suburbs of Chicago. I always considered myself a lucky man. I grew up in an ordinary family. No luxury, but no poverty either. My parents taught me that the most important things are work, honesty, and family. And I always believed that if you give your family love, bring home money, and build a house, you are protected. I thought happiness was something you could build with your own hands. I started my construction company when I was 30. I worked day and night to provide for my wife and child. We bought this house in a quiet neighborhood. We had a dog, a small flower bed in front of the house, and a swing for our daughter. I thought that was happiness. Ashley, my wife, we met when I was 27. She worked as a secretary at a law firm. She was beautiful, smart, caring. At least, that's how I knew her. I fell in love immediately. We dated for a year and a half, then got married. I remember holding her hand as we stood at the altar. I looked into her eyes and thought, this is my angel. This is my safe place. We'll be together forever. Chloe, our daughter, when she was born, I cried. I held her tiny hand and vowed to be the best father, that I would always be there. And for the first few years, I was truly happy. We walked in the park together, went on picnics, watched cartoons before bedtime. I hugged my wife, kissed my daughter, and thought I had everything a man could dream of. I was the kind of man who believed that loyalty, hard work, and love were an armor that protected you from everything. I believed that if I was honest, people around me would be honest too. I was naive. I didn't know that, while I was working to give them a better life, my wife was building a different life, a life where there was no place for me. And on that day, when I took the first sip of coffee made by her hands, I took a step toward my grave. I just didn't know it yet. I had always considered myself a strong man. I rarely got sick and was always in good shape. Construction work is not an office job. You have to carry heavy loads, stay on your feet all day, and solve problems. I was used to the strain, but about 6 months ago, I noticed something strange for the first time. It was an ordinary morning. I got up as usual, took a shower, and went to the kitchen. Ashley had already made coffee. I took a sip and burned my tongue. "Careful, it's hot," she smiled. "I can see that," I joked. Chloe was painting at the table, splashing colors around. I looked at them and thought, this is it. This is the perfect life. I finished my coffee, kissed my wife, grabbed my tools, and drove to the site. It was a day like hundreds before, but that was the day I felt the weakness for the first time. I was lifting a bag of cement like always. I used to lift 2 at once, no problem. But this time, I felt like my strength was gone. My hands were shaking and sweat broke out. "Nick, are you getting old?" my coworker joked. "No, just didn't sleep well." I brushed it off. I thought it was just fatigue, but it was only the beginning. The next morning, I woke up feeling broken. My muscles ached and my head was buzzing. I looked in the mirror. My face was pale and my eyes were bloodshot. Ashley walked into the kitchen, smiling as always. "How are you, honey?" "Something's wrong." "I'm just tired," I answered honestly. "Oh, maybe it's a virus? I'll make you some herbal tea." Her care touched me. I was grateful. I didn't know then that this care was part of the plan. I went to the doctor, got some tests done. The doctor looked over the results. Weakness in general? Yes. Fatigue, headaches, stress over work. "You're fine, Nick. Just rest and take some vitamins." I left the clinic with a sigh of relief. Everything was fine, just stress. I bought vitamins. Ashley added some herbs and powders, saying they were natural supplements. I trusted her, but week after week, it got worse. I was driving when my vision suddenly darkened. I was lifting a box and felt dizzy. I was sitting at the table having dinner when my fingers went numb. One day, I fell right in the bathroom. Just fell. Slippery floor, a sudden wave of weakness, and there I was, lying on the ground. Ashley ran in and helped me up. "Oh, God, what's wrong with you?" "I don't know." I sat on the edge of the bathtub, sweat running down my back, trembling. And for the first time, I thought, what if this is something serious? But I still didn't know how serious it was. That it was death, slowly dripping into my cup every morning. I started getting used to the weakness. I woke up already feeling exhausted. I drank coffee. It made me feel a bit better, but only for a short while. I started thinking, maybe this is just aging. I'm not 20 anymore. Ashley cared for me. She brought me medicine, made teas, and said, "I'm worried about you. You are my everything." And I looked at her with gratitude. I didn't know yet that she was the reason for my condition. I didn't know I was looking into the eyes of my killer. I had always believed that care was a sign of love, that a woman who cooks dinner for you does it with love, that a cup of coffee from your wife is a sign of care, that when she covers you with a blanket after you fall asleep on the couch, it's because you matter to her. But over time, this care started to feel excessive. Not like before. I didn't notice it right away. Because, when you love someone, you're blind. I continued feeling unwell. And every time I got worse, Ashley was there. "Sit down. I'll do everything. Don't go to work today, rest. Here, drink this tea. I ordered it specially. It's expensive, but it will help." I saw a caring wife. But what I didn't realize back then, I wasn't seeing care. I was seeing a trap that had already closed around me. Little by little, I started noticing things. These weren't hard proofs. It was something deeper, a feeling that something was wrong. I would take my cup of coffee and catch her glance. Before, it was just coffee. But now, she watched me tensely, as if she was waiting for me to take a sip. I didn't think much of it. The first time, the second, the third, but the fourth time, I felt a chill down my spine. One day, I came home early from work. Ashley was in the kitchen, mixing something in my cup. When she saw me, she flinched. "Oh, you're home already?" "Yeah. What are you doing?" "Just some vitamins for you." She smiled nervously. I didn't know then that it wasn't a nervous smile. It was the smile of someone afraid they'd been caught. But I brushed it off as my imagination. Because who would ever think that their wife was poisoning them? I started noticing more little things. She no longer let me make my own food. I used to get up, make myself coffee or a sandwich. Now, not anymore. Whenever I walked into the kitchen, she rushed over. "Sit down, I'll do it." Before, I thought it was care. Now, it started feeling like control. But I pushed those thoughts away. Because I loved her. Because I trusted her. I didn't know then that those same hands making me coffee were already digging my grave. That was the first time I thought, what if this isn't just an illness? The thought flashed, and I pushed it away immediately. It felt insane. I lay beside her at night, listening to her breathe in her sleep, thinking, "She's your wife, Nick, the mother of your child. You're being paranoid. You're just sick. That's all." But the seed had already been planted in my mind. And every day, it gnawed at me more. I started noticing her phone. Before, it would just lie on the table. Now, it was always in her hands. Always face down. Always locked. Once, I heard a message tone when she was in the shower. I glanced at the screen. It said, "Tom, how is he today?" I didn't understand it then. I thought it was just a friend from work. After all, Tom was an old friend of mine. We had worked together years ago. We were close. I didn't know back then that this Tom had long stopped being my friend. He had become my death sentence. And after that message, for the first time, I thought, What if something really is wrong? That thought wouldn't leave me alone. I started waking up at night, sitting in the dark kitchen, staring at the cup I drank coffee from every morning. I turned it in my hands and thought, what if? But I still didn't believe it. I was still that man who believed in love. I was still naive. The next day, I heard her talking on the phone. I was walking down the hallway and caught part of a sentence. He can barely walk already. I think one more month and everything will be ours. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest. I walked into the room. Ashley went silent. Who was that? My mom. She smiled nervously. She was asking about Chloe. I smiled back, but something inside me broke. I didn't know it yet, but at that moment, I crossed a point of no return. I was no longer a man who believed. I had become a man who suspected, and that was only the beginning. I could no longer ignore my thoughts. It became an obsession. I woke up and went to bed with one question in my head. What is she hiding? But the scariest part was that another thought had started to grow alongside it. I was afraid to even put it into words, but it echoed in my mind again and again. Is she poisoning me? It sounded like paranoia. Maybe it was the exhaustion and stress. Maybe it was the weakness that wouldn't go away. But after that snippet of the phone conversation, one more month, and everything will be ours, I could no longer pretend it didn't happen. That evening, I made a decision. I had to find out the truth, at any cost. As always, Ashley went to put Chloe to bed. I heard her reading a bedtime story. I stood by the bedroom door and waited for her to come out. She had a routine. After Chloe fell asleep, she would take a shower. She always left her phone in the room. This was my chance. I sat in the living room, pretending to watch TV. I heard the water turn on in the bathroom. I went to the bedroom. Her phone was on the nightstand. My hands were shaking. I picked it up. I knew the password. It was our wedding date, 1508. I entered it, unlocked. My heart was pounding like crazy. I opened the Messenger app. There were a few chats, but one stood out immediately. Tom, my friend, the man I trusted, the man I worked side by side with, shared beers after work. I opened the conversation, and what I saw hit me like a brick to the head. How is he today? Everything's going according to plan. Weakness, constant fatigue. He started falling. Good. Just a little more, and it will all be ours. The main thing is that he doesn't suspect anything. Don't worry. He trusts me. He doesn't know what a bitch I really am. You're my bitch. And soon we'll be together. I love you. I love you too. It'll be over soon. I read those messages over and over. My heart was racing so hard I thought it might stop. I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. This was my wife. This was my friend. And they were discussing my death like a business deal. I took screenshots, quickly sent them to my email, then deleted the sent message notification. My hands trembled. I put the phone back exactly as it was. I went to the living room and sat down. The water was still running in the bathroom. I sat there, staring into the darkness, trying to process the reality that had just destroyed my entire life. I wanted to storm into the bathroom, grab her by the throat, and scream, "Are you insane? It's me. I did everything for you. How could you?" But I held back. I couldn't do anything rash. I already knew. I was not a victim. I would not let them win. I would make their lives hell. I sat there, thinking about how I would destroy them. Slowly, coldly, methodically. Ashley came out of the bathroom, drying her hair with a towel. "What are you watching?" "The news." I tried to smile. "How are you feeling?" "A little better. Thanks to you," I said, disgusted by my own words. I lay next to her in bed. I listened to her breathing peacefully in her sleep, and I lay there, eyes wide open, thinking. She already thought I was a corpse, but I will survive, and I will bury both of you. I could no longer afford to be weak. That night, lying next to the woman planning my death, I realized it was me or them. I had to stay one step ahead. I had to play their game better than they did. But the difference was, now I knew their rules. They still thought I was blind. I made a decision. There would be no outbursts, no rash actions. I would destroy them quietly. So quietly, they wouldn't even realize they had lost until it was too late. The next morning, I got up as usual. I felt exhausted, but this time it was a different kind of fatigue. Not just physical, it was emotional emptiness. Ashley, smiling as always, handed me my coffee. I took the cup. I knew there was poison in it. I looked at it like it was Black Death in a porcelain mug. But I took a sip. I smiled at her. Tastes good. She relaxed. She thought everything was going according to plan. But now, the plan was mine. I went to work, but on the way, I stopped at an electronics store. I bought 3 small hidden cameras with motion sensors. Technology had advanced. Those cameras could be hidden anywhere. After work, I told Ashley I'd be late, but instead, I went home early. I knew she was out at the park with Chloe. I had 2 hours. I installed the cameras. One in the kitchen, inside the wall clock. Another in the living room, on the bookshelf. The third in the bedroom, in a flower pot. They activated when someone entered the room. Everything was uploaded to the cloud. I was the only one with access. That was my first step. I no longer relied on intuition. Now I needed evidence. The second step, I called an old acquaintance, a lawyer. His name was Robert Williams. We used to play football together. Now he specialized in family law. I didn't tell him everything. Not yet. I just said, Rob, I might be having some issues in my marriage. I want to be prepared, so I can get custody of my daughter if it comes to that. I understand, he said. I'll get everything ready. But be careful. I'm more careful than ever, Rob. The third step, I started faking weakness. I acted tired, broken. I deliberately limped sometimes, leaned on walls. Ashley liked it. I saw it in her eyes. She thought I was getting weaker. That soon, she'd be a widow. But in reality, I was stronger than ever. I reviewed the first camera recordings 2 days later. I sat in my car, opened my laptop, and I saw everything I feared and expected. On the footage, Ashley opened a small jar of white powder and poured something into my coffee. She stirred it carefully, then placed a cup on the table and called me. Honey, breakfast is ready. I watched that video, feeling the rage boil inside me. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached, but I held back. This wasn't the end yet. I was only halfway through my plan. I needed more. I wanted them to expose themselves completely. I wanted my strike to be final, leaving them with no chance to recover. The next morning, I drank the coffee again, and once more, I acted as if I knew nothing. I watched her fake smile as she looked at me, and I smiled back. We were no longer husband and wife. We were enemies. She just didn't know it yet. That evening, I took the jar from her makeup bag, the one she used to poison me. I scooped a small sample into a little plastic bag. The next day, I took it to a private lab. I need to know what this is. You'll get the results in a week, the lab technician said. I nodded. I knew that in a week, I would have all the cards in my hand. All that would be left was to set the pieces on the board. I came home, hugged my daughter, and sat down for dinner. Ashley laughed, talking about some TV show. She was certain her plan was working, that I was getting weaker, that she was almost a widow. But I looked at her and thought, you don't know it yet, but you've already lost. Time seemed to freeze. Every day turned into a waiting game. I was waiting for the lab results. I was waiting for the moment I could launch my final strike. And in the meantime, I was living with a woman who had already marked me for the grave. I drank my coffee, knowing there was poison in it. I ate dinner, knowing she was counting on my heart giving out. I kissed her on the cheek, and every time, I wanted to wipe my lips right after. But I endured, because I knew everything would change soon. A week later, I got a call. "Mr. Nick, this is a lab. Your results are ready." The voice was calm and professional, but to me, it sounded like a hammer blow to my head. "Can I come now?" "Yes, of course." I left work without saying a word to anyone. I drove with my hands gripping the steering wheel, so tightly my knuckles turned white. At the lab, a man in a white coat met me. He was about 50 years old. I didn't even remember his name. I didn't care. He handed me a folder. I opened it. I read slowly, each word cutting into my mind like a blade. Detected. Cumulative toxin, classified as a veterinary sedative. With prolonged consumption, it causes liver damage, nervous system deterioration, and weakening of the heart muscle. Can lead to death with sustained intake. I sat there, holding the folder, feeling like I had been doused with ice water. It was official proof. I wasn't crazy. This wasn't stress. This wasn't fatigue. This was poison. I looked up at the technician. How much longer would it have taken to kill me? Depends on the dosage, but if you've been ingesting this daily, another month or two, and you would have had a heart attack or organ failure. A month or two. It matched what I had heard in that phone conversation. One more month, and everything will be ours. I thanked him, took the results, and left. In the car, I just sat there, holding that piece of paper, feeling the urge to scream. Out of rage, out of pain, out of fear. I could have already been dead. Ashley had been planning my funeral while I kissed her goodbye every morning before work. Tom, my friend, was probably already picturing himself on my couch. But I was alive, and now I held their death sentence in my hands. I came home. As usual, Ashley greeted me with a smile. "How was your day, honey?" "Tiring. Headache." I sat at the table. She placed a cup of coffee in front of me. I watched the poison steaming. I looked at her sitting across from me, watching me closely. She was waiting. I took a sip, smiled. "It's good, as always." And this time I felt satisfaction, because now I knew. And she was no longer a threat to me. She was already dead. She just didn't know it yet. That night, I met with Robert, my lawyer. I laid everything out for him. He listened silently, occasionally nodding. When I finished, he looked at me and said, "Nick, this isn't just a divorce. This is a criminal case." "I know. Are you ready?" "Yes. I want her to end up with nothing. And I want full custody of my daughter." "Okay, I'll handle it. But you need to be careful. They might sense you know something." I nodded, but I had already made up my mind. I wouldn't just gather evidence. I would destroy them publicly. I would make sure this betrayal haunted them for the rest of their lives. The next morning, I woke up a different man. I was no longer someone afraid of dying. I was the one holding my enemies by the throat. I drank the same coffee, but now it was no longer poison. It was their last sip of freedom. I smiled at her. I hugged my daughter. I was the perfect husband. But inside, I burned with one desire. I want you to fall so hard, you'll never rise again. After holding the lab report in my hands, I was no longer a man who was afraid. I was no longer seeking confirmation. I had no more doubts. I had become the executioner of those I had given my life to, those I had loved and trusted. I no longer asked myself, why would they do this to me? I asked, how can I make this hurt them as much as they hurt me? I knew that simply going to the police wasn't enough. Yes, they would face consequences, maybe probation, maybe fines, but it would be quiet. No one would judge them publicly, but I wanted them crushed, in front of everyone, I wanted their faces to burn with shame. I wanted them humiliated, just like they had humiliated my trust. I made a decision. I would expose them at a family gathering, in front of their parents, in front of our friends, in front of those who thought we were the perfect couple. Their disgrace would be as big as the pain I felt when I discovered the truth. I started planning. One evening, during dinner, Ashley handed me the perfect opportunity. You know, we haven't had everyone over in a while. Maybe we should throw a barbecue? Relax a little. A barbecue? I pretended to think. Yes, my parents, yours, Tom and Linda, just family. Great idea? I smiled. I've been thinking about relaxing a bit too. She had no idea I had already placed a cross over her future. I got to work. I called a videographer I knew. He worked weddings. I need someone to film a small family gathering, I said, just for the memories. No problem, Nick. I need it discreet, multiple cameras. I want to capture everyone's reactions. I got you. I prepared a flash drive with everything on it. Screenshots of Ashley and Tom's messages. Video from the hidden cameras showing her putting poison in my coffee. The toxicology report. I titled the file simply, The Truth About My Wife. For the next few days, I played the perfect husband. I helped set the table. I played with Chloe. I talked about the vacation we would take after the barbecue. I hugged Ashley, kissed her, complimented her. But inside, I was burning. It was no longer hatred. It was something colder, something ruthless. The day of the barbecue arrived. Sunshine. The backyard was decorated with lights. Guests were arriving. Her parents, my parents, Tom and Linda, a couple of our mutual friends. Laughter, jokes, the smell of grilled meat. A typical family day. I glanced at Tom. He was confident, joking, pouring himself a beer. I saw him sneaking glances at Ashley. I saw her smiling back. They already saw themselves as winners. They were already dividing my assets. But they didn't know this was their last day on that throne. The videographer worked quietly. The camera was tucked in the corner, unnoticed by the guests. He pretended to just be filming a happy family gathering. I waited for everyone to sit down, to relax. And finally, that moment came. Everyone was full, slightly drunk, at ease. I stood up. Friends, I'd like to say a few words. Everyone quieted down. Ashley looked at me with a loving smile. Tom leaned back in his chair. I want to thank everyone for being here today. Family means everything to me. I looked at Ashley, and especially you, my love. She beamed. We've been together for 10 years. We've been through a lot, and I always thought I knew you, but I paused. But recently I learned the truth. Her smile disappeared. Tom tensed up. I found out that the woman I trusted with my life was poisoning me. That my friend, I stared at Tom, was planning my death alongside her. Everyone froze. I gathered evidence. This is the toxicology report. This is a video of Ashley putting poison in my coffee. This is their chat, where they discuss how they'll split my money after I'm dead. I held up the flash drive, and all of this is going to the police. Ashley turned pale. That's not true. Her voice trembled. Did you do this? Linda turned to Tom. This is a misunderstanding, he stammered. Her father buried his face in his hands. My mother started crying. Ashley dropped to her knees. Nick, I didn't want to. He made me. Shut up. It was the first time I said it coldly. And she shut up. Everyone sat there, stunned in silence. I'm filing for divorce. I'm taking full custody of my daughter. And both of you will face trial. I stood up from the table. I had won. I had survived. And they had fallen. But I made sure it was beautiful. In front of everyone. When the guests began to leave, the yard felt completely different. Just a few hours ago, it was filled with laughter, jokes, and clinking glasses. Now, silence. A heavy, suffocating silence. I stood by the gate, watching Linda drag Tom away by the arm, while he mumbled something about a misunderstanding. My parents avoided my eyes. They were hurt. My mother was crying. My father stayed silent. Ashley's father stared at me with a gaze full of emotions. Shame, anger, helplessness. Her mother stood off to the side, clutching her chest. And Ashley, she sat on the grass, her head in her hands, quietly sobbing. The angel I once thought was my happiness was now broken, humiliated, lying in the dirt. I felt like I had won, but the victory brought me no joy. When everyone left, only the three of us remained. Me, Ashley, and Chloe. Our daughter didn't understand anything. She ran around the yard, showing us her chalk drawings on the path. Her childish laughter cut through me like a knife, because I knew this was the end of our family. Ashley approached me. Her eyes were red, makeup smeared. Nick, please. I made a mistake. I got confused. I love you. We can fix this. I said nothing. I looked at the woman who was once my whole world. But now, all I saw was betrayal and lies. Tomorrow you'll leave, I said quietly. Where will I go? I don't care. She covered her mouth to keep from screaming. And Chloe, she stays with me. Ashley dropped to her knees. Please. It was a mistake. I was scared. Tom, he manipulated me. I leaned down, looked into her eyes. You poisoned me. No matter what he told you. You were the one putting poison in my coffee. She sobbed. I could have died. I could have left our daughter an orphan. And all because of your greed. Because you thought I wasn't good enough. I stood up. Tomorrow, you'll pack your things and leave. If you cooperate, I won't put you in prison. And if I don't leave, then I'll go to the police. She turned pale. No, I'll leave. The next day, she packed her things. I watched her fold clothes, gather her makeup, her jewelry. It all seemed so ordinary, but this was the end. I stood in the doorway, holding Chloe's hand. Mommy, will you be back soon? Ashley pressed her hand to her mouth to hold back her sobs. Soon, baby. You love me, right? I love you so much. She looked at me one last time. I saw fear and emptiness in her eyes. I closed the door. That same day, I met with Robert, my lawyer. We filed for divorce. I attached everything to the claim. The messages, the toxicology report, the camera footage. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted the court to grant me full custody of Chloe. And I knew, with this evidence, I had the advantage. Robert looked through the papers and said, she doesn't stand a chance. But be ready. It's going to get ugly. A few days later, Ashley filed a counterclaim. She accused me of being aggressive. She claimed I hit her, that I was an unfit father. I knew it was desperation, but even then it hurt. This woman had tried to kill me, and now she wanted to take my child. I showed Robert the claims. He just smirked. They'll lose, but we need to see this through. Tom, his life started falling apart, too. Linda kicked him out that same evening. He ended up in some cheap motel. He was fired from his job when the scandal surfaced. I saw him a couple of times. He tried to talk to me. Nick, buddy, come on, forgive me. We wanted a different life. You're dead to me, Tom. Forget I exist. I turned and walked away. I wasn't even angry anymore. I had buried them both in my mind. 3 months passed. The court granted me full custody of Chloe. Ashley was allowed to visit once a month under supervision, but she never showed up. I heard she had moved back in with her parents, that she was looking for a job, but no one wanted to hire her after the scandal. She had become an outcast. Tom left for another state. He was gone from here. I sat on the porch of my house, drinking coffee. Real coffee this time. Pure. Chloe was playing in the yard. I watched her and realized I had won. I had survived. I had kept what mattered most to me. But I was a different person now. I would never trust the same way again. I took a sip and thought, from now on, I'll always be on guard. No one will ever make me a victim again. After Ashley left, I naively thought the worst was over. I had exposed them. I had survived. I had driven that snake out of my home. But it was only the beginning. The real battle was still ahead. That battle was for Chloe. I knew she would fight. I knew she wouldn't give up our daughter so easily. Not because she loved her so much, but because Chloe was her last connection to me. The only string she could still pull. And I was right. A week after I filed for divorce, I received a summons. Ashley had filed her own claim. Her statement read, I demand joint custody of our daughter, Chloe. The father is aggressive. He frequently yells. He has threatened me with violence. The child has repeatedly witnessed our conflicts. I sat in my lawyer Robert's office, clenching my fists as I read the papers. Dirty tactics, he said. I knew this was coming. Are you ready for it? I'm ready for anything. The first hearing was set for a month later. That month became the hardest test of my life. I worked, cared for Chloe, and gathered evidence. We had a psychologist evaluate Chloe. The doctor confirmed she felt safe and happy with me. I collected character references from work. My colleagues wrote that I had always been calm and responsible. There was no history of aggression. I involved my neighbors. They testified that they had never heard arguments or shouting from our home. I gathered everything, every little thing, because I knew this was my daughter, and I would not let that woman take her. Ashley didn't sit still either. She brought her friend to court, the one who had witnessed the barbecue, the one who had seen the confrontation. I saw Nick yell at Ashley, she said. He threw her out like a dog. He acts like he owns that child. I gritted my teeth as I listened to her lies. I knew it was all false, but the court listened to everyone. Ashley cried right there in the courtroom. I made a mistake, Your Honor, but I'm a mother. I love my daughter. I can't live without her. It was a performance, a game, but I could not afford to lose. At one of the hearings, she tried to deliver the final blow. Your Honor, I fear for my daughter's safety. Why? The judge raised his eyebrow. Nick has health issues. He's on strong medication. He's had episodes. I'm afraid one day he'll pass out, and something will happen to Chloe. I nearly jumped out of my seat. That bitch had decided to use my weakness against me, the weakness she had caused herself. But Robert was ready. He stood up. Your Honor, we have medical records. Nick has no chronic illnesses, but I saw him collapse in the bathroom, she shouted. That was from the poison you, Ashley, were putting in his coffee. That's a lie. That's a fact, confirmed by a toxicology report. We will submit it to criminal investigators if necessary. Ashley fell silent. I saw her lips twitch. She realized she had pushed too far. The trial lasted 3 months. Those were the hardest 3 months of my life. I lost sleep. I lost weight. But I held on. Every night, when I put Chloe to bed, I watched her fall asleep and told myself, I won't let them take her. She is my life. And finally, the court gave its ruling. Full custody of the child is awarded to the father, Mr. Nick. The mother is granted visitation once a month under the supervision of a social worker. Ashley broke down in tears right there in the courtroom. I felt no pity, only relief. I had won. I had saved my daughter. After the hearing, she approached me in the hallway. Her eyes were red, her face swollen. Nick, please forgive me. I ruined everything. I wanted a different life. But I loved you. I still love you. You poisoned me, Ashley. I know. I was stupid. But Chloe, she will be happy. I'll make sure of that. And you "You're dead to me." I turned and walked away. I never looked back again. I was driving home from court with a strange feeling in my chest. It felt as though a concrete block had been lifted off my shoulders. Breathing was easier. Living was easier. I had won. I had saved my daughter. I had survived. But along with that victory came another realization. I was no longer the man I used to be. I would never again be the naive Nick who believed in love, friendship, and family values. It was all a lie. I picked Chloe up from daycare. She ran toward me and hugged me. "Daddy." "Hey, sunshine." I lifted her into my arms. She laughed, and I felt tears welling up in my eyes. I barely held them back. I hugged her tighter. "You will always be with me. I promise." She didn't understand. She just smiled. But I knew. I had fulfilled my mission. I had saved her from that woman who was willing to leave her an orphan. The first few days after the court ruling felt like we were learning to breathe again. I woke up early, made breakfast. We fried pancakes together, spilled milk, laughed. I took Chloe to the park. We went on the swings, ate ice cream, fed the ducks. I looked at her and realized she was the only thing that truly mattered. Everything else had been an illusion. "Ashley," she tried calling me twice. I didn't answer. I didn't want to hear her voice. I allowed her the court-mandated visits, once a month, but she never showed up. She disappeared from our lives. I heard she had moved back in with her parents, got a job as a cashier at a small store. I didn't care. Tom, I heard about him too. People saw him in a neighboring state, working in a warehouse. He no longer existed to me either. These two people, whom I once considered family, were now nothing more than shadows of my past, and I had no intention of ever looking back. 6 months passed. I stood on my porch, drinking coffee. This time, it was pure, without poison. Chloe was getting ready for school, running around the house, searching for her notebooks. I watched her, and I felt good. I finally felt like I was home, that I was safe, that no one would try to kill me while I slept. I had survived. I had won. I had become stronger. But I knew I would never be the same again. I would always be on guard. I would always keep my hand on the pulse. I would never fully trust anyone again. That was the price I paid for my life. I took a sip of my coffee. I looked at the sun rising over our house. And I thought, now I know what betrayal looks like. And now, I will always be ready. After the court's decision, I thought it was over. I had taken my daughter, and we were living in peace. But I had forgotten one thing. Betrayers rarely give up without a fight, especially women who have lost everything. The first few weeks were quiet. Ashley didn't visit, didn't call. I even thought she had accepted that it was over. But then, it began. At first, it was subtle. Mrs. Long, our elderly neighbor, mentioned during a casual chat, "Your wife was here the other day. She was crying. She said you hit her, that you mistreat Chloe." My heart pounded harder. I barely held back my anger. "And you believed her?" "I don't know, Nick. You've always seemed like a good family. But who really knows what goes on behind closed doors?" I realized Ashley had declared war, a war of rumors and lies. The next day, my mother called me, her voice trembling with tears. "Son," she called me. She said, "You're planning to flee the country with Chloe, that you're going to cut her off completely." "Mom, don't listen to her. She's lying. She wants to divide us." I explained everything to my mother, but I could hear the worry in her voice. That made me even angrier. Then I noticed how the neighbors had started looking at me differently, as if they suspected something. I found out Ashley had made a Facebook post. "I lost my daughter because of my abusive husband. He used money and connections to take her from me. A mother has no right to see her own child. Tell me, is that fair?" The post gathered dozens of comments. Women sympathized with her. They called me a monster. I saw her strategy. She couldn't take Chloe through the courts, so she tried to destroy my reputation. She wanted me to break and give up. But she didn't know one thing. I was no longer the man she could break. I met with Robert, my lawyer. We gathered screenshots of her posts and recorded her calls. We filed a defamation claim. I showed the neighbors the camera footage of her poisoning me. I told my mother every detail, no matter how painful. Little by little, her lies began to crumble. The neighbors realized they were being manipulated. Comments appeared under her posts from those who knew the truth. "You're lying. We were at that barbecue. We heard everything. You poisoned your husband. If I were you, I'd keep quiet." And then Ashley disappeared from social media. Her plan had failed. I had started to relax. I thought she had finally given up. But she came back with another blow, a summons, another lawsuit. This time, she had hired a new lawyer, a petition to review custody. I was furious. I wanted to go to her and scream in her face. "Don't you get it? This is over." But I had already learned. Wars aren't won with emotions. Wars are won with a cold head. The hearing lasted a month. She cried again. She lied again. But this time, the judge knew our history. He had read the previous ruling. He had seen the toxicology report. I won. For the second time. The court left everything as it was. After the hearing, she stood in the hallway. I walked up to her. "That was your last chance. If you try this again, I'll get a restraining order. You'll never see Chloe. I just want to see her. After everything you did, I'm her mother." "No, Ashley, you're a venomous snake, and you chose that path yourself." I walked away, and I knew this time she wouldn't come back. After losing the second court case, Ashley disappeared. No calls, no attempts to see Chloe. She simply vanished from our lives. At first, it made me uneasy. I thought, maybe she's hiding, planning something else. But the truth was much simpler. Her life had simply fallen apart. I heard from mutual acquaintances that her parents had kicked her out. After everything that happened, they couldn't bear the shame. She lost their support, their money, and the roof over her head. She stayed with a friend for a few weeks, but even that friend quickly grew tired of her breakdowns. I heard Ashley even tried to get back with Tom, but by that time, Tom was barely surviving himself. Eventually, she got a job as a cashier at a supermarket. She rented a cheap room in a rundown building, surrounded by alcoholics and junkies. For a woman who once dreamed of a life of luxury, this was hell. One day, I walked into that supermarket by chance. I was just buying groceries, and I saw her. Ashley was behind the register, tired, pale, wearing a cheap uniform with dark circles under her eyes. I didn't recognize her at first. She looked like a shadow of the woman I had once loved. Our eyes met. I saw shame, pain, and something else. Regret? Remorse? "Hi, Nick." Her voice was quiet, broken. I nodded. "Hi." I paid for my groceries and left. I no longer felt anger. I no longer felt hate. I just saw a person who had already been punished by life itself. I came home and hugged Chloe. My life went on, and hers was already over. A year had passed. I no longer thought about Ashley or Tom. I was building a new life with my daughter. But one day, fate decided to show me their final chapter. I was in a neighboring town, stopped at a gas station, and I saw him. Tom was standing by a dumpster, dirty, unshaven, holding a plastic cup, begging for change. I didn't recognize him at first, but he recognized me. "Nick, man, wait." I froze. It was him, my former friend, the one who had planned my death, the one who wanted to take my place. Now, he stood there in a torn jacket, hands trembling, begging for help. "Brother, I got nowhere to go. I know what I did. But please, anything. I looked at him and felt nothing, just emptiness. Nick, I'm sorry. I thought it would all turn out differently. I didn't mean for it to end like this. I stared at him silently. I remember drinking poison coffee, falling in the bathroom, holding Chloe in my arms, afraid I wouldn't wake up again. I looked him in the eyes and quietly said, "You died to me back then," and I walked away. I heard him shouting something behind me, but I didn't turn around. I got into my car, drove home. Chloe was waiting for me. We were going to the park. I sat behind the wheel and realized I had won. Completely. Finally, they got what they deserved, and I would never look back. The end. Please subscribe to our channel Stellar Stories. We have new amazing stories coming out every day. Thank you.